Hello, sir. Good evening and welcome. I believe you can see my screen shared. Okay. So today we are looking at internal analysis. The previous lecture we spent time on looking at the environment of a business entity. So we are turning our attention to internal analysis. This will be the outline of presentation. We'll talk about strategic capability, customer needs, critical success factor, value chain, customer relationship management, resources and competences, capabilities and competitive advantage. And then we'll analyze strength and weakness as a part of the SWOT analysis. Now, let's start with strategic capability. Thus is the ability of an entity to perform, and not just perform, to be able to also prosper by achieving its set strategic objectives. And strategic capability can also be described as the ability of an entity to use its core competences to create competitive advantage for itself over its competitors. Now, take note that the monitoring of the environment in order to take advantage of opportunities and to um, break down your threats is not sufficient in themselves to provide an entity with competitive advantage, i.e., meaning that in trying to create competitive advantage for an entity, you don't look at just taking advantage of the opportunities within the external environment and dealing with threats, but also you have to look from within. You have to be able to create what we call strategic capability. And this comes from competitive advantage. If an entity is able to create competitive advantage for itself, it is able to attain strategic capability. And competitive advantage usually would come from successful management of the organization's resources, its competencies, and then its internal capabilities. Strategic capability reflects the ability of an organization to use and exploit the available resources as the entity's own resources through competencies developed in the activities and processes it performs. So over the years, the activities and the processes that the organization perform can give the organization strategic capability if they're able to exploit these resources very well. And the ways in which these activities are linked internally and externally, and the overall balance of core competences is important for developing strategic capability of an entity. Now, how do you achieve strategic capability? To achieve strategic capability, we can take a look, or from the point of view of the resource-based view, where an entity is expected to have its resources let me get a pointer here. Where an entity is expected to have its resources, and these resources are exploited well to create what we call core competencies. And these core competencies will enable the entity to be able to deliver on their operations very well. That would give them a competitive edge over their rivals, and thus eventually would give the organization what we call the strategic capability. So this is how you achieve strategic capability. You start with your resources, identify your resources, and then identify your core competencies, follow through, and then eventually the organization is able to create strategic capability for itself. Now let's look at customer needs. Generally, customers buy products or services for a reason. There is no way a customer would buy a product without any reason. And when they can, or if they are given the opportunity to choose between two products or two competing products, they would often have a reason to choose one over the other. And the major factor in deciding which to choose usually borders on price. Price is the main factor customers would take into consideration to make a choice between two competing products or services. And oftentimes, customers would prefer choosing the cheaper option. They will choose the one that is cheaper in terms of price. Okay, and especially when there's no significant difference in the product in terms of the value those two products or those alternative products provide the customer. They will generally go for the low priced item or product. Now, if this decision is not based on price as usual, the customer must have other reasons or other needs that a product or service provides. It could be better quality product, so they will not consider the price because they are looking at higher quality, so they will not mind the price. They will go for the high quality. Better design features, so in this case, they are going for better design features and not the price. They don't mind much about the price. Whether or not the product is available to purchase, they would consider this. And then the convenience of purchase, how convenient it is, or is it to purchase the product or services. These days, we have so many convenient ways of purchasing products and services. You could do that through mobile money. You could use your card. You could do online purchasing and so on and so forth. You don't require to pay cash or go and then pay physically when you don't have the means to even transport to where the product is. Okay, so customers would choose this and ignore the issue of price. And then the influence of advertising or sales promotion. Sometimes customers are moved by what they see on adverts on social media. They It moves them, and they don't really mind about the price. They think that probably the advertised product or promoted product mean quality. Okay, so they will just go for it without bothering much about the price. Okay, now let's look at types of customers. What are the various types of customers? Generally, you can classify customers into the following. You can have consumers. These are customers that buy products and services for their personal use, or consumption, for their personal benefits. Those are what consumers. And then we have industrial and commercial customers who usually might include business entities. Business entities are also classified as customers, and then government organizations and agencies. So these are the three basic types of customers based on how they patronize products and services. Now, in general, these three types of customers have different needs. Different customers have different needs. Industrial and commercial customers, they are more likely to be influenced by price. Unlike consumers oftentimes may not be influenced so much by price. They are usually paying attention more to the brand of the product, the promotion the product is enjoying, and so on and so forth. Government too usually would not be moved by quality. Usually they are moved by prices. If you look at procurement, one of the key things they look at is price. So when they ask for quotations from suppliers and they provide them, usually they would look for the cheapest, right? They will look for the cheapest and then take them. They don't mind so much about the quality of the product. Okay. Now let's look at what we refer to as the 4 Ps of marketing. The 4 Ps. Some other models would look beyond 4 Ps. They will say 7 Ps, but then eventually everything, the remaining 3, if you look at them critically, they would also fall within this 4 Ps. So this is one model we can use to analyze the market of an organization. So we have product, price, place, and then promotion. They all begin with P, so we call it the 4 P. So when you are providing a service or providing a product to your customers, you need to be able to mix these essentially. You need to be able to mix the product, the price, the place, and then the promotion before it finally gets to your customers. Now, let's take them one after the other. Now, for the product, the design features of the product, the quality of the product, the after-sales service and warranties, the technical skill of the personnel who are providing the service, and the interpersonal relationships that the providers have with their customers is a very important feature of the product, right? Price. Selling price for the product is very essential, as we said, especially industrial consumers or industrial customers would be very much more interested in the price of a product. I'm not saying consumers do not. They also look at the price, but in most cases, industrial customers would look more of the price that is being sold to them. They would look at opportunities for discounts, whether they will be able to obtain discounts on their purchases, because usually they would buy in bulk and then they would expect that there will be some discounts on the products and services they are patronizing. Place. Thus is looking at how the customer would obtain the product or the service, or the channel of distribution of the product. Where can they get the product to buy? How can they access the product? Can they access it through the internet? Do they have to go to the shops to be able to obtain these products? Can it be delivered to them wherever they are, and so on and so forth? This is what is addressed by the 3rd P. The 4th P is promotion. This is how the product is advertised and promoted. And this also includes direct selling from direct selling agents or direct sales agents to the customers. Okay, so if you have a product, essentially the product would have all these. If you are selling a product in a market, right, it will have all these as what? As its features. All right, and essentially what you have to do is to be able to balance these in order to appeal to the customer needs. All right. Let's look at critical success factors. What are critical success factors? These are factors that are essential for strategic success of an entity. So there are so many factors that an entity would consider. However, there are some that are more critical than others. There are some that are more important for achieving strategic success than others. These are what we refer to as what? Critical success factors. Those components of the strategy in which the organization must excel, keyword is must excel, in order to outperform the competition. Okay, so like I said, there are many factors. Some of them may not be necessary for the organization to outperform their competitors, but the ones that are necessary for outperforming competition are what we refer to as what? Critical success factors. And when management are analyzing a market and customers in the market, they should oftentimes be advised to try to understand which factors are essential, okay, to succeed in the business in the market, and which factors are not so important, so that they can pay more attention to the more important ones, which we call the critical success factors or the CSFs. Now, strategic success is achieved, first of all, by identifying these critical success factors. Next, setting targets to achieve these critical success factors and be able to achieve strategic success. Okay. Now, before even you set targets, usually it's advised that you have to be able to make them measurable so that it can easily be quantified. So you quantify them and then you set targets. So once you meet them, or it becomes easier to tell whether or not the targets are met. Okay. It is important that CSF is identified as at the different stages of the strategic planning processes. CSF should be identified essentially during the process of assessing the strategic position. And we talked about this earlier. It should be also assessed during the level or at the level of making strategic choices. And then also it is important when you are doing what strategy implementation. Performance targets should be set, as we said, for each of the CSFs that have been identified. And this involves deciding on a measurement of performance, okay, that can be used to assess each CSF and then setting a target for achieving them. All right, measure target for CSFs are called KPIs. So the target that you have set is what we refer to as what? KPIs, okay? The ones that are measurable, and as I said, it is important to ensure that they are measurable. Okay, then they become your what? Key performance indicators. So this will tell if you are able to meet your targets or not. So that is what? KPI. What are some of the approaches to use CSF? Right? So we have 6 main approaches or steps as put forward by Johnson and Scholes in order to achieve competitive advantage through the use of CSF, that is the critical success factors. First, you identify the success factors that are critical for profitability of the entity. And then next, you identify critical competencies to achieve a superior performance in the CSF. So you look at the competencies that are important, that are essential to be able to achieve the CSF. For example, if your CSF is, say, low sales price. Okay, your critical success factor, thus is what is making the organization able to outcompete within the competitive environment because they have set low sales price. Okay, this is your CSF. Now, a critical competence might be to be able to have control over cost, right? If you're able to control cost very well, then of course it is much more easier to provide your prices at low prices or provide your services at low prices. Okay, all right. Another example is that if your CSF is prompt delivery after receipt of orders, so essentially this is a factor that is critical for you to sort of overcome your competitors. So that is your CSF, right? To be able to do this, a critical competence might be that you must be able to do production in a very fast manner. You have to be able to produce quickly so that you can what? You can deliver prompt after the receipt of orders from your customers. Third example is if a critical success factor is, say, low level of sales returns, okay? When you sell your items, they hardly come back as returns, okay? They hardly come back as rejects, okay? Here in this case, your critical competence might be either a zero defect in production because it is defect in production that would make customers return your product, or identify 100% of defects on inspection. So if your product during the manufacture, it goes through inspection, ensure that the inspection is so rigorous such that it will be able to identify any defect. Okay, in this case, you do 100% inspection. You don't sample to inspect because once you sample, chances are that some of the items may be missed. Okay, some of the defective items may be mixed, but if you're able to put in 100% effort to inspect every single product, then chances are that you would have 100% or zero defect in in production. As soon as any item is identified to be defective, they will not be sent to customers. So third point is that the entity should develop the level of critical competence so that it acquires the ability to gain a competitive advantage in the critical success factor. Now, identifying the KPIs for each critical competence is the next step. The target KPIs, if achieved, should ensure that the level of critical competence that creates competitive advantage is obtained in the CSF. The fifth point is to give emphasis to developing critical competencies for each aspect of performance so that competitors will find it difficult to achieve a matching level of competence, right? Develop your critical competencies very well such that competitors would find it difficult to match your level of competence so that you can continuously enjoy competitive advantage over them and eventually achieve organization success. And finally, you monitor the firm's achievement of its targeted KPIs. You monitor them. It could be monthly monitoring, it could be quarterly or half year. But the quicker it is, or the earlier, the much if you're able to monitor this very much often, that is more advisable, right? So if you can do it monthly, it is more advisable so that you can put it right if it is not being achieved, if you are able to achieve your KPIs. All right. Let's talk about benchmarking. Essentially, we know what benchmarking is, so we'll not spend too much time discussing benchmark. Benchmarking is essentially a process of comparing your own performance against the performance of someone else, preferably the performance of the best of the best. So within a competitive environment, you'd have some organizations that are doing so well, some that are not doing so well. And so if you want to do well, first of all, you need to be able to close the gap between you and then the best performing competitor within that space. So you first of all identify that particular organization or entity that is doing so well than you. Look at how or what they are doing right. Why are they doing that better than you, so that you can what? Look within and then be able to close that gap between you and them. It's a way of what? Improving performance or continuous improvement. Now, the purpose of benchmarking is to identify differences between your performance and the performance of the selected benchmark, where these differences are significant. So oftentimes you may see some differences. If they are not significant, you can ignore them. But once they are significant and they are causing the progress of the organization, then you have to be able to identify methods that you can use to close these gaps, so you can upgrade your performance. And one way of improving performance might be to directly copy the practices of the benchmark organization you have selected. Okay. But practically, some of these things are very difficult to be able to do. Now, take note that benchmarking, one of the importance of benchmarking is because it's able to provide an assessment of how well or badly an entity is performing compared with its competitors. And there are several methods of benchmarking or competitor benchmarking. We have internal benchmarking, we have operational benchmarking, we have competitive benchmarking, and then customer benchmarking. Internal benchmarking, here, the organization might compare the performance of its units within, and then compare its units within the organization to other units that are doing well or better. So if this is a bigger organization that has, let's say, strategic business units, so you can compare between strategic business units. If it's an organization that is a functional organization, you can compare between functions. Let's say the marketing department compared to the information technology department. So that is what internal benchmarking, just so you improve the various units of the organization. Operational benchmarking. Here, an organization might compare the performance of a particular operation with the performance of a similar operation in different business entity. For instance, you may talk about direct selling. Okay, thus is an operation within the organization, direct selling. So direct selling, some other organization might be doing better than you in terms of what direct selling. So you copy from what they have and how they do it, so you can improve your performance. Competitive benchmarking, here the entity might compare its own performance and its own products and services with those of its most successful competitors, so that generally you look at the performance of the most competitive competitor within the space, and then you take them as the benchmark, and then try and close the gap between your performance and that of the biggest competitor. And then finally, we can talk about customer benchmarking. This is more or less looking at what the customer really wants. Okay, what do they expect you to perform? How do customers expect you to do? Right. So you look at what customers want, the specification in terms of the products that they want, how they want their services, or how they want you to provide their services, and you will be able to match up to what they want. That is essentially customer benchmarking. Now let's look at methods of competitor benchmarking. Oftentimes, competitors will not provide more information about themselves, right? Because if they provide the information, you'd use it and be able to close that gap. They may not be happy or too happy about it, that others are closing the gap, because they want to be the leaders within that market space. Okay. But unfortunately, sometimes some information that you would require from your competitors might be even available or made available by virtue of the fact that the law or regulation requires that they provide that information. In that case, they have no option but to provide the information. And so you, as a competitor who is seeking to improve your performance, can lay your hands on those information and use it to your advantage. A typical example is published financial statements, okay, especially for organizations listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and for that matter, any other stock exchange. They are required to publish their financial statements. And so if you go to their website, these information are available. And you essentially who is trying to improve your performance, you can go for the financial statement and then analyze it. Okay. Before you analyze, you can calculate your financial ratios, and then based on those ratios, you would be able to see how well they are doing. Okay, what is making them do well. Okay, so that you can use that as a benchmark to improve your performance. Okay, again, you could also have access to the product or services that these competitors are providing. So you can go to the market, pick a sample of their product, and then take it to the lab and then analyze it. So once you analyze it, you know what is their secret ingredient, for instance, what is making them do well, and so on and so forth. So you may be able to copy. This is what the Chinese have been able to do so well by copying from the Americans, the Europeans, and so on and so forth. And now they have gradually become a giant, or becoming giants within the competitive space or business environment. Again, information about competitors can be gathered by even talking to customers of your competitor. Any customer who is ready and willing to talk to you about their experience with that organization is a source of information for you to capitalize on to improve your performance. Okay, again, sales prices is another important information or a method that you can use. As for sales prices, oftentimes they are available on the market. Almost every organization would put their sales prices up on the market, except a few who'd want you to contact them directly before they provide you with their sales prices. Okay. Now, when you are doing competitor analysis, it is important to include an assessment of the critical success factors of all the firms in the market, right? The critical success factors of companies in the same market might differ, though, and individual companies might succeed in their market for different reasons. Okay. So that's about benchmarking. Let's look at value chain. Value chain. What is value chain? Okay, value is the benefit that a customer would obtain from the use of a product, a particular product or a service. The benefit a customer will derive from using a product or service is what we refer to as value in this context. Okay, and value is provided by the attributes of the product or services, the characteristics of the product or services, the features of the product or services is what creates the value, right? Customers oftentimes are willing to pay money to obtain goods or services because of the value they think they would get from the products, right? The price they are willing to pay put a value on those benefits, right? Okay. And for business entities, they can create values on their products, okay? When they're able to, for instance, buy raw materials and turn them into finished products. If they're able to buy raw materials and turn them into finished product, they would have created value. And it is this value that the customer would want to enjoy, and so they pay for it. Okay. Now, in a competitive market, the most successful business entities are those that are most successful in creating value. Be able to create value, then of course customers rush because they know that they are going to obtain value from your products or services, and then essentially you'll be able to expand your client base, be able to improve on your revenue, and so on and so forth. That would make you successful. Now, according to Michael Porter, if a firm pursues a cost leadership strategy, I'm sure you remember cost leadership strategy and then differentiation. If an organization pursues cost leadership strategy, the main aim is for it to create the same value as its competitors, but at a lower cost, right? They are providing their services or selling their goods or products at lower cost, but then creating the same value as other competitors. This is essentially what the cost leadership strategy is about. But for other organizations whose strategy is what differentiation, their main aim is to create more value than the rest of the competitors and be able to what charge more for their services or products. All right. Now, the only reason why a customer should be willing to pay a higher price than the lower price or the lowest price in the market is because of the value they have seen in your product that they are going to what enjoy. Okay. If they see this value, then of course they'll be willing to pay more to obtain that value. This extra value might be real or perceived. Sometimes it may not be a real value. It's just a perception. Okay, it's a perception that this product is quality, and so everybody or customers are ready to pay cut-through prices to get them. Okay, sometimes it's just a brand name. Essentially, there is nothing special about it. It's just a brand name. Okay, they have high brand name, and everybody is talking about it, and so they think that it has a value. It may, for instance, be. It may not be real. It may not be real, and but then, of course, whether it's real or not, customers are still ready to what to pay you for the value of your product or services. All right. Other factors in the marketing mix might also persuade a customer that a product offers more value. Okay, for example, a customer might pay more to buy one product than a lower priced option because it is available immediately. Okay, it is available immediately, not because it is cheap, but it's because it's available immediately. Because the customer has been attracted to the product by what? By advertising. Probably it's just because of the advertising. That's why they are buying the product, and not particularly because of the value you are providing for the customer. Now we'll look at value chain as a series of activities, each of which adds value. So value chain. So we are looking at a chain of activities that an organization carries out. Okay, and for each aspect of this chain, or for each component of this chain, as an organization, your aim is to what? Is to create value at each point. Okay, the total value added by the entity is the sum of the value created by the individual component of the chain. So you can define value chain as the activities within and around an organization which together create a product or service. The strategic success depends on the way that an entity as a whole performs, but competitive advantage, which is a key to strategic success, comes from each of the individual and specific activities that make up the value chain. Okay, so we'll see how the value chain is. Essentially, the value chain is split into what we call primary value chain and then the secondary value chain or the support activities. And this is how it is. So the primary value activities include inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, and then finally service. So this is essentially the primary activities that underlie the value chain of an organization. And then the secondary activities include the firm infrastructure, okay, the human resource management of the organization, the technology, information technology development within the organization, and then their procurement. These are seen as what secondary value chain. So essentially, it is important you create value here first, then you look to the support activities as well. All right. So let's look at them. The primary value chain. Inbound logistics. These are essentially activities that are concerned with what? Receiving and handling raw materials, components, storing them until they are needed for what? Production, or until they are needed for what? Sale. Okay, these are what? Inbound logistics, items that are coming into the organization. In a manufacturing company, inbound logistics include activities such as materials handling, transport from suppliers, and inventory management, and then inventory control. Okay, so once the items have arrived into the organization would go on to what? To carry out its core activity, which is what? Operations. Okay, so operations are activities concerned with converting the purchased raw materials into items or products that customers want. Typically, in a manufacturing environment, this might include the machining, the assembling, the packing, testing, quality control, maintenance, etc., etc. So these are what essentially the operations within the organization that gets raw materials converted into what? Finished products to be delivered to customers. Then outbound logistics. These are the activities that are concerned with the storage of finished goods before they are sold, distribution, and then the delivery of these goods to agents and customers. Okay. For services, inbound logistics relate to the delivery of service at the customer's own what? Premise. Outbound logistics relate to the delivery of a service at the customer's own premises. All right. Then marketing and sales. These are the activities that inform customers about the product or service and then essentially persuade them to buy those products or to purchase those products. Okay. Marketing and sales usually include activities such as advertising and promotion. There's often a saying that if you have a product and then you don't market or promote it, it's like you standing in the dark and then beckoning at a lady. Essentially, she will not see you. So you are the product, and then the lady is what? Is the customer. So if you put yourself in the dark and you call someone to come, nobody would see you, let alone come. All right. So marketing and promotion is very important. Then finally, service. These are all the activities that occur after the point of sale. So after sales service, installation, warranties, repairs and maintenance, all these are what constitute service. So these are the primary value chain activities within the organization. And what an organization would seek to do is to ensure that value is created at each point, at each of these 5 points. Okay. Now let's look at the support services. Essentially, we have procurement, which is concerned with buying or purchasing resources for the entity. Example, materials, raw materials, equipment, plants, machinery, etc., etc. Okay. And we expect that because procurement should be able to buy these items at lower price, okay, enjoy economies of scale, enjoy discounts, and so on and so forth. Once you have a procurement unit, these benefits should be able to come. And technology development, these are activities related to any development in technological systems of the entity. For example, how the product is designed, okay? Research and development and information technology systems. Technology development is an important activity for innovation. These days, technology is almost taking over a lot of the activities within many organizations. Okay, and here, under the concept of value chain, when we say technology, it also includes acquisition of knowledge and skills. Okay, in this case, all activities have some technology content, even if this is just some particular knowledge or some critical or specialized knowledge that has been obtained. All right. Then we have human resource. We have human resources management. These are activities concerned with recruiting, training, developing, and rewarding people in the organization. And then finally, we have corporate infrastructure. Corporate infrastructure. This relates to the organizational structure and its management systems, including planning and finance management, quality management, and information systems management. Okay. So you can compare these support activities as what necessary overheads. All right. I'm sure we remember the concept of overheads. Okay. And this is to support the primary value chain. Okay. But value can also be created by support activities. So even though they are supporting, it doesn't mean that they cannot create value or you cannot create value from there. Essentially, every component of the value chain should be able to provide some appreciable level of of value, both the primary and the support activities. Okay, so essentially, for example, procurement can add value by identifying cheaper sources of materials or equipment. IT can add value to operations with the introduction of new system that can make work faster, that can make work easier, that can take um, um, give the organization some leverage. Okay, all right. And then HR management can add value by improving the skills of employees through training and competency development. Okay. And then corporate infrastructure can help to create value by providing a better management information system, MIS, that helps management to make better decisions. All right. So as a strategic manager or as a manager at the level of strategy, you should be able to contribute towards the identification of ways and means of what adding value to every aspect of the value chain. Okay, because this is what would improve the competitiveness of the organization. Management should be able to look for ways of adding more value at each stage in the primary value chain and the secondary value chain. Okay, they should be able to consider ways in which support activities can add more value. Okay, and essentially the following questions should be asked. Okay, so if you are at the top there, you should be able to ask these questions. Okay, who are your customers? You should be able to know who your customers are. You should be able to understand your customers. You should be able to ask which features of your product or services do these customers value. Okay, why are they purchasing or patronizing your product? What value are they getting? Okay, which part of your product, what makes them like or put a value on that product or services you are providing for them? How do you provide value to the customer in the product or services we provide? Okay, how can we add the value? How can we add to the value that the customer receives? Essentially, how do you improve the value that the customer is getting from you? Okay, and how can you add value more successfully than other competitors? Sometimes it's actually difficult to add value. Okay, it's often very difficult to be able to add value because if you're adding value, um, oftentimes it is possible that your competitors can easily see how you added the value and then they will copy and then they will be at the same level as you. Okay, all right. And then you ask yourself if the organization have those core competencies that it can exploit to their competitive advantage or to give them a competitive edge. All right. Now, one way of adding value is to alter a product design, to change the product design and include some features that will meet specific needs of your customers than other products on the market. Okay, so you can add some features to the product and then that would attract or give the product additional value. Okay, you can also create value by what? By market segmentation. Okay, you can segment the market and in that case, you can what? Create value or additional value. Okay, you can also make your product easier for customers to buy, to have access to the product. That is also what? Value creation. So essentially, um, sometimes you might want the product to be available anywhere that the customers want. Anytime they want it, they can go to the internet, for example, make orders, purchase them, and then the product will be brought to their doorstep. So this can create value. for the product or services you are providing. Okay, value can also be created created by how you deliver your service or product, and we see these days in the past 2-3 years, especially during COVID, where a lot of organizations or a lot of entities are finding innovative ways of delivering products. So there's what we call it, delivery vans, delivery motorbikes, and so on and so forth. Everybody is doing online sales, and then be able to get their products um, through these means to their customers, and that is what essentially the creation of value. And again, value can also come from providing reliable service. Reliable service. Everybody knows that, oh, as for the service, anytime you want it, you can get it. Okay. And it is always reliable. It is always reliable. You can depend on it 100% of the time. And so that is what a value that you have created for that product or service. Okay. Now, when a business is planning to expand into new market, it is important that the business chooses a market where there is opportunity to add value, okay? So that you will be able to create value, and then you'll be able to attract customers who are ready to buy your product because of that particular value you are creating. If you enter a new market where you cannot create value, then essentially it becomes difficult to attract customers. Customers might be willing to pay more for a product or service if it is delivered to them in a more convenient way. Okay, they might be willing to pay more for household items, for example, if they are delivered to their homes, which is what we see these days. Okay, essentially you can sit in your room, in your house, in your office, and order for anything you want, and it will be delivered to your to your doorstep. Now, let's look at the link between value creation and strategic management. Now, by adding value as an organization successfully, okay, it can help you to improve on your profitability, and then also reduce the costs of operations, okay, or improve your sales. Now, some of the extra benefits might be passed on to customers in the form of a better quality product or service, or a lower selling price. Now, if so, then business entities business entity shares the benefit of added value with the customers and gains additional competitive advantage. So your customers are enjoying the value that you are creating, and then you are also enjoying competitive advantage because um, everybody wants your product. Okay, essentially you are attracting a larger section of the market to your side. Again, take note that the value that you are creating should not always be given to customers immediately, okay, in the form of lower prices, or shareholders in the form of higher dividend. It can come in later, okay? The benefit can be reinvested to create more competitive advantage in the future. So once you get these benefits, you might want to defer releasing the benefit to your customers, and then releasing the benefit to your shareholders. So in the case of shareholders, you would say that instead of giving them dividend now, you use the money or the value that you have created to expand the business, and that once you expand the business, the share price of the business also improves, and essentially that is something that will be enjoyed by the shareholder anytime they decide to sell their shares. All right. Now, it is important to note that there is a link between corporate strategy, financial strategy, and investment strategy. Okay. Corporate strategy essentially is aimed at adding value to the customer. So if you're at the top there as a corporate strategist, or as a part of senior management, then your aim is to create value for the customer. Now, finance thus is able to feed into what providing you with what the necessary earnings and dividends. Because if you're able to provide or create value for customers, customers will be attracted, they will buy your product, and you'll be able to earn your income and then make some profit and then be able to what, give dividend out to your shareholders. And essentially, this fits into what your financial strategy, which creates value for what, for the shareholders, because you've given them dividend, you've given them funds, you've given them what, expansion in their share prices. Okay, and so essentially you're able to what, create value for your shareholders. And once you create value for your shareholders, you're able to what, provide finances for what, for investment. Okay, you have enough funds to be able to what, create value for the future. You push in that money back into the organization, expand it, and then you're able to what, create future value. And this goes back into what, providing the necessary resources that would help the organization to create more value for its customers. So it's a cycle essentially. So corporate strategy, financial strategy, and investment strategy essentially are linked through what, value creation. They are linked through value creation. Now, it can be argued that the creation of value is the most important objective for a successful organization. Okay, if you want to be a successful organization, you have to be able to create value than your competitors. Okay, you should be able to create value for your customers, not for a short term, but what, over the long term period. Okay, you continue to create value from time to time for your what, customers, so that they will continue to be with you. They will have that loyalty and continue to um, buy your products and services and then reward you for the efforts that you are making to create value for them. Since value adding, since value addition is critical to the success of any business entity, it is important to identify how it creates value. Okay, how does it create value? Where it is creating value, and whether it could do better and create more value. Okay, the entity's success in creating value can be compared with the performance of what, competitors. As an organization, if you are creating value, you should be able to compare yourself to your competitors and see whether they are also able to create value, and to what extent are they creating better value than you, or you are creating better value than them. Okay. All right. So we'll end today's lecture here and then continue tomorrow with customer relationship management. All right. Thank you so much for your time.